Hello, hello. How's it going? Dmitry, can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And I know we got some viewers on this morning. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me just fine. I'm trying out a new microphone. Um, yeah, welcome to everyone watching the Chicago Kotlin user group meetup. Definitely let us know in the comments like where you're watching from. I'm starting to realize that we have a much like a bigger group than we used to have before pandemic, and I'm starting to realize this. I almost feel like I want to put out like a fun poll because, you know, I used to know like what the Kotlin Chicago user group was made up of. We used to have like a good portion of Kotlin heads like coming from server side development, and then some others like we had like a small portion of functional programmers, and we had a good portion of Android folks. So I don't know. I'm just like really excited to see people coming back consistently. It's been really fun. Dmitry, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, and where are you streaming from?
I'm from London. It's like a nice day today. Pretty good for March. Plus 18 and sunny.
Well, that's beautiful. I think London might be taking all the good weather. It's pretty gray out here. Actually, it's been a very mild winter in Chicago, and we seem to have snow today. So that this might be
Wow.
I'm hoping this is like the last fall spring.
Yeah.
It's that time of the year. Oh, that's great. I see that we have some viewers watching from New York City, some others from Northern Ireland. So this is kind of a fun group to be with today. Yeah, so Dmitry, tell me a little bit about yourself, and also, can you tell us, everyone like watching today, tell us a little bit more about like what Gilded Rose Kata is.
So, talking about myself first, I've been doing Java for a while before Kotlin existed. Then I switched to Kotlin. That's the short story. And I'm working on server side. I'm not an Android developer. In terms of Gilded Rose Kata, so in the first place, kata, it's a small exercise to improve your like programming skills or some other skills. It's a metaphor which comes from martial arts, where like in karate, I've never done it, but in karate there is this concept of like repeating the same move multiple times so you can learn how to do it properly. So it's the same kind of idea, but applied to programming, that if you do the same exercise multiple times, then maybe you will learn slightly different
Ah,
things from it every time you do it again. So in this case, this Gilded Rose Kata is about refactoring. So it's not just about writing code from scratch. And
I
as
see.
the name implies, I've done it before, so it's Kata. So obviously, I've done it.
So I like this because it's a little bit like kind of like, just like flexing your muscles on test writing.
It's not just test writing, it's refactoring, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's
true.
both in some ways.
It's so what are some of like the examples that we'll be like going over, like what are some aspects that you'd like us to watch out for in your presentation?
It's mostly live coding, so I think the best thing you can do is just to be interactive. And I don't know, tell me what to do if you want me to try something. That's the best thing. Try, I guess overall, like, what are the highlights? Is that refactoring is not just about changing code, it's also like making sure you know that the change is safe somehow. Yeah. And I guess maybe
Yeah.
also the idea of like never not giving up and saying this code is like good enough.
I
Maybe
love that.
emergent design, the whole idea of emergent design, that through refactoring you can find a better understanding of the code yourself, or some underlying concepts which you couldn't think of in the first place.
Yeah, these are all great things. Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you so much, Dimitri. I'm really looking forward to it. And for those that are watching live stream today, you heard Dimitri. So please feel free to comment in the chat, especially anytime you like, if you know, maybe we'll do a little bit of mob programming. I know this formatting is like a little bit awkward because I definitely miss the days where we can just hear your voice and interjection can occur. But what I can do is if I see your comments in the chat, please feel free to comment. I'll be sure to write the instructions out as well. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and making sure that I'm giving voice to it. So this will be the way we go about it. How does that sound, Dmitry?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. Dmitry, I hope it's okay with you. I'm going to boot you off the screen for just a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to run through, our usual set of logistical items. I always find that to be helpful. So I will be doing that. Okay. I'll see you in a few.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. For those of you that are tuning in just now, welcome to the Chicago Kotlin user group. It's really great to have you on here today. Please let us know where you're streaming from. It's always exciting to see where folks are streaming from. We'll be talking about refactoring Gilded Rose Kata with Dmitry Kandalov. So, for those of you who might be interested or wish to give a talk, we do have an open CFP year round. It's a great way to expand your network. It's a safe space to practice talks, and it always looks great on a resume. So, it doesn't matter if it's just sharing a personal project. I always enjoy those. Or you want to do a live coding session. Maybe you have a talk that you want to practice for another place. We have that open CFP. Please check in the YouTube description. There is a link there year round, and we welcome like first time speakers and experienced speakers alike. We've had a slew of both, and it's been just like a really great program. So please don't be afraid to contribute. For those of you who might not be as familiar with Chicago Kotlin user group, we believe in being inclusive. We are an inclusive group. So please be curious, ask questions, and do everything to avoid assumptions. And even in pandemic, we still want to do everything to continue to grow trust, empathy, and friendship. Okay, so a couple other logistical things. If you're on Kotlin Lang Slack, we do have a channel. It's the Chicago channel. And oh my goodness, I'm going to moderate that. We also have the Chicago Kotlin Twitter. And if you're interested, oh my goodness, it didn't even save the reactions. You know how it goes. That was incorrect. So the two Twitter chats that you do want to see is Dmitry Kandalov and Chicago Kotlin. So if you feel free to take screenshots, be sure to tweet about anything that you really enjoy. Just if you have Twitter, that's also a really great way to keep connected with both our speakers and also Chicago Kotlin. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand the floor over to Dmitry. Dmitry, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to, I think what I'm going to do is just kind of like keep my camera off and keep myself muted, but I'll stay on the stream. I will be monitoring the chat and I'll just turn the camera back on when I do see questions or I have questions myself. So that way I'm just like not distracting for the audience.
Yeah, please feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna again just one more time. We're going through a live coding session today. Please feel free to contribute anything in the chat, whether it's questions, whether you want to just like put in like your input, like, hey, it might be better to do this, anything like that. I will do my best to give voice to those opinions because of this kind of streaming format. So all right. I'm going to mute myself off. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, cool. I'm not sure if the screen is on the stream. Maybe it
I
is.
think we got it.
Oh, cool. So yeah, sorry, here is the plug for this reason. So this is the website on which you can donate some money to Ukraine. And this is the link that few people who I know in Ukraine shared. So this is a legitimate link. The website is a bit confusing. So when you go there, at least what works for me, instead of clicking on buttons, I click on this link, fondi.eu. Then it takes it to this website where you should switch from Ukrainian to English. And then you can donate only in Ukrainian money. And the exchange rate, I think, is like if you donate 3,000, it's going to be like $100. So that's the plug. And moving on to the actual refactoring. So as you can guess, this is the title of the talk. And one of the ultimate sources of this refactoring, Kata, is this project on GitHub by Emily Back. So this is what it looks like. And as you can see, there is an implementation in many programming languages. Initially, it was C#, and Emily, I think, is just maintaining this repository. She didn't come up with this refactoring exercise, but obviously it's Kotlin meetup group, so I'll do it in Kotlin, and I will use IntelliJ as an IDE. So that's like the beginning of all the slides. So I'll switch to IntelliJ IDE, which is here in presentation mode. And this is pretty much what you see after you check out the source code. And like with any other code base, like we have to just explore it, right? The good thing is that there are only 4 files in the source code. And maybe let's start with Gilded Rose test just to look at the code. So what we can see is that it's called Gilded Rose test. For some reason, it's internal, so I'll just delete this. Then in the first place, we have an array of items where this is a redundant type parameter, so I'll just clean this up quickly. So the items go into constructor of an object called Gilded Rose, whatever that means. Then this instance called app for some reason, so maybe it's worth changing to Gilded Rose. Then there is a function update quality, which is called on Gilded Rose. And then there is an assertion which takes an item, the first item from Gilded Rose, and asserts on its name. So if we run this, I think it will fail. And it fails because it expects fix me, but it was foo. So I guess if we do this, it will work. Right? So overall, I guess the idea here is that maybe you can even inline items, that we can add items as a named argument. So we pass items to Gilded Rose object, then we call some function on it, and then we can assert on the change in items, although in this case nothing changes, so maybe the whole test shouldn't be foo, but it should be something like item name doesn't change. So yeah, that's the one file, right? So then let's maybe look at the item. So we're adding items here, so let's look at the item. Item is a kind of small class with 3 arguments. I'll reformat them like this. If you don't know, it's an intention to put parameters on separate lines. I just have a shortcut for it. So each item has name, selling, and quality. Whatever that means right now is maybe like not super important, but it gives you an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, Dmitry, just a quick question, and also, just a clarifier for the rest of the audience watching this. So when you, this Gilded Rose, it's just kind of like a project that you get.
Yes, if you clone the repository from GitHub, which I mentioned, that's the project. And right now I'm just exploring to even understand what the project is about.
Okay.
So so if you want, you can imagine us like pair programming is like, oh yeah, that's the exercise. Like you should improve the code.
It sounds like viewers might be interested in seeing that GitHub repo. Like maybe they want to dig along with you. Yeah. What's
Yes.
the name of that GitHub repo?
If you just type Gilded Rose,
I'll be sure to share it in the chat as well. Okay, Emily Bash, Gilded Rose, Refactoring Kata
I
on
think if you
GitHub.
just type
Okay.
Gilded Rose, it will be one of the top results.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to post the link. Sorry, didn't mean to completely
it's good.
interrupt. Yeah, no, we'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and post these, and we'll continue right on.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, maybe it was just like me looking at the code without explaining a lot, but I guess that's the whole structure here, is that there is an item object and there is a Gilded Rose, an item class and Gilded Rose class. So item is kind of straightforward. What we want to refactor is Gilded Rose. So you have seen it's an object which has just one function and it operates on items. But this function is quite big and convoluted and doesn't make a lot of sense. Lots of conditions, like 5 nested ifs inside a loop. So that's ultimately the goal, right? And there is this test. We could go down the path of, for example, opening Gilded Rose requirements, reading them and trying to express them as tests. That's one way of doing this, like kata. Or the other way, we can try and create a regression test and just focus on improving this code. So that's what I will do, I think, because it's a bit more entertaining. So to begin with, let's again look at the text test fixture. So that's the second file in tests, right? And it has a similar idea here. So I'll do formatting of everything. Maybe I'll delete these comments. I don't know what they are. It's just, sometimes it's good to clean up code while you're reading it, if it's some safe cleanup. So it's a similar idea. It's the main function. It's not really a test. And it has an items, like whatever they are. They're passed into Gilded Rose object, which is called app again. So maybe I'll call it Gilded Rose. And then inside a for loop, this Gilded Rose is update quality is called on Gilded Rose. So Gilded Rose is modified. And items are printed, I believe. So there is a loop which prints items. So it's kind of like the previous test, but it's done more times. So here there is a variable called days, which is by default 2, but we could increase it. Maybe let's just run it and see what it outputs. So this is the output. I don't know what that means. Like the first thing, we can see println OMG hi. And in this case, we can assume that let's assume that the existing code does what it does, and it's a legacy code. Maybe there is a good reason for it to have this output. So we'll try and preserve the behavior. So after this, that's like the loop, which goes through each day. It prints the number of the day, and then it's basically a CSV. So it prints this header, name, selling, and quality, right? And then it loops through all items and prints each item, which is a comma-separated values and items. I think that's the name, selling, and quality. So what we can do, let's maybe do a quick cleanup. So one thing I often notice that whenever I open a file, if there is in the top right corner some yellow triangle, then it's worth cleaning things up. So here IntelliJ suggests that we could use size check as is not empty. So that's the transformation, which is, I would trust IntelliJ to get this right. So I'm doing it even though we don't really have test coverage for this. And the similar thing here is that it suggests to replace it with until, which I think is all right. So now, like, this file is all kind of clean. So I can run it again. So it should be kind of similar output, but I trust IntelliJ in this case. Maybe that's already a point. It's interesting formatting, but it is a point where we could commit this and call this a tidy up, because I'm like fairly confident in all these changes. And the idea here is to use this code and to write a regression test. So what we can do, instead of 2 days, maybe let's do 100 days, like a bigger output. And I'll copy this into clipboard and save it for later. So what we want really is to have a class called Gilded Rose Regression, for example. And it will have a test which will be called update items over 100 days. So we're essentially just locking in the current behavior. So I'll delete this, and basically I moved all this code into the test function. So now there are a couple of red things because it doesn't take arguments, so I'll just delete that. And this could be val. So I can run this test now, the whole class, and it still just prints things out. So I can compare it with my clipboard. So that's like a manual regression testing. So you can see my clipboard pretty much matches what we have as an output in the editor. The only difference is the first line, but that's just like how the code is running. And I can overview that there is only one difference in the top right corner, and on the gutter, there are no lines. Like the only blue line is at the top, so I can visually confirm that it's all fine. So that's the way of doing a manual regression. So then the next thing would be to somehow, instead of printing, save it, for example, in a stream. And maybe one of the ways to try and extract log function. Unfortunately, IntelliJ is not like clever enough to replace old usages. So there is a trick to maybe extract parameter as a variable first and then try extracting function. So you can see now it's detected a couple more places instead of just that one place where I can inline message. So just using Control L10 to inline. And there are still two left though, unfortunately, so I'll do them manually, replace them with log. So I think it didn't replace it because we need to do toString on item. And here it's not print to line, it's like an empty line. So I can run it again. We still just extracted a function, and I compare it with the clipboard. It's still just one difference, which is what we want. So at this point now, we can introduce variable called maybe output, and it will be basically a string to which we append a message and a new line. And at the end of the loop, we can now finally add the assertion, and we assert an output. So for now, I'll leave it as an empty string so we can see how it fails. So as we expect, test fails. If I see the diff, so it says, I expected empty, but that was the output. And output on the right-hand side, again, I can compare with my clipboard. And again, there is only one difference. So actually, it says 2. I think it's because previously it also had at the bottom this thing. But everything else looks fine, so I can copy the actual output. And I'll create another variable called private val. I'll use a multi-line string here, basically. Same output, and let's plug it in here. So this is like a very manual way of doing an approval testing. So now the test finally works. Maybe one other thing to do is to rename this into Gilded Rose Regression. That could be a good commit. Added Gilded Rose Regression. So it might be worthwhile going through this code quickly once again, just to make sure now that we have actual testing in place, we can modify things in a more radical way. One thing, if I start from the top, there is this logging at the top, but there is lots of logging in the loop. It would be nice to have side effects in one place. So I would try and move it closer to the loop so we have all output in one place, so that works. Then we have items. It's a bit funny in Kotlin to have an array of items. I would say I would use a list if possible, but maybe we can like do it later. And then we have a list of items. What's not clear, it's not clear what the arguments are. Obviously, I can ask IDE to highlight them, but in Kotlin there is a better way because there is an intention to add names to call arguments. So I press Alt Enter and then choose the top one. The good thing here is that I can do it even faster because I wrote a plugin called Quick Fix, and there is an action in Quick Fix which I bound to F1, which invokes basically the top intention. So I can go like down and just press F1 everywhere. So that's kind of cool. I think it's a bit better because now, even if you never read this code, it's clear what this number 20 is here, it's a quality of item. So then that's the end of the items. We pass them into Gilded Rose. Then we have days variable, which is used once, so I'll just inline it. Let me run the regression, so it still works. Then there is a while loop, which I think is better to be replaced with for each. My reasoning for this is that for each is less flexible. Like in for loop in Kotlin, you can do continue and break and so on, but for each is more rigid, which is a good thing if you want to be sure that you know what's going on. So I'll do maybe also could rename I to day because that's the current day, and then can replace this for each loop as well. This loop with for each. I think that's the cleanup of the regression. Hopefully this gives you some idea of what actually is going on there.
So Dmitry, I know earlier you mentioned side effects.
Yeah.
Could you tell a little bit more about that for new folks?
So what I meant by this is that, for example, when we create items, we construct objects in memory, and they are just constructed. When we create Gilded Rose objects, it's also constructed. Memory is allocated, so I guess this is a side effect. What I meant by side effect is that ultimately this whole test is about asserting an output, which is modified inside the log function, and that's the side effect on which we assert on line 34. So that's what I meant by that. That's like the useful output of the program in this test is seeing what was printed out. And it's nice to have this all in one place. In a way, you can think of it in test terms. So this is going to be these lines going to be set up. Then we do exercise like the fixture, or like we do some actions, and then we assert on them. So it's good to have all the actions in one place instead of having this one log somewhere before even our setup. So I guess there are different angles to think about it. One was like not having side effect by modifying output. And the other is to have like this given when then setup and test, even though here I'm doing it explicitly with empty lines, for example. It also made me think I forgot to remove this printer line because we don't need it anymore. Hopefully this answers the question. And yeah, I'll commit it again as refactoring, because it was refactoring. So this is maybe a bit funny because it was supposed to be about refactoring this talk, but now I spent like so much time just talking about some regression. And I think that's one of the problems I've seen with all refactoring talks at conferences, that people just like talk about tools, but actually the first step in refactoring is to have some tests, or like get your code into the shape where you can write reliable tests and have a good code coverage. So talking about code coverage, like, okay, we have this test, like I randomly chose 100 days, right? So is that good enough? And there is no easy way to know. There is a way to know, like, if it's not good enough. What we want essentially is refactor this code here, right? So one way to even check what's happening is to run this regression with code coverage. So IntelliJ has this built-in code coverage tool. Like there are other tools, but I'll just use this for simplicity. So once we run it, we see on the left in the gutter, everything's kind of green, which is a good sign. It means everything is covered, right? So if I do something like if false, and then I do println, and I run code coverage, which I didn't. So let me run it again. So this should be red, so it didn't even get to this line. Well, I guess this code was optimized away completely. That's why it didn't even run. But if something is not covered, it should go red. So this is quite optimistic, really. But it's also interesting that this code coverage, it has settings, which I set up with use tracing, which says that it's going to enables accurate collection of branch coverage. So what it means is that, for example, in this case, in this condition, there are two possible ways for this condition to be true or false, or in this condition, this can be true or false, and the right-hand side can be true or false. So this code coverage is kind of clever enough to figure out that all possible multiple cases went through for each condition. But it's okay for conditions, but you still shouldn't trust it because there are more complex examples if you access hash maps, arrays, and so on. So in this case, like if I do +1, will this test fail? So luckily for us, it does fail. So that kind of proves that our regression is covering this case. And the case when if we accidentally type I+1, it will be covered. So that's, in a way, is called mutation testing. So we can change code, for example, to -2 and see if the test fails. In this case, I changed to -1, it failed, changed back to changed to -2, it failed, switched back to -1, it passed. So that's a useful technique as well, especially if you have doubts. So all the green stuff by the code coverage, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that all possible invariants are working. So I can try again here with 100, and well, it works.
That's really impressive. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interject. That's my excitement. Yeah, no, that's an amazing like trick you showed the audience, especially the part about showing like you can literally see where your test is being covered for test.
Yeah, you just look up mutation tests, and unfortunately, there are not that many tools, and there are some fundamental reasons why it's really expensive. Because if you imagine like trying to do really intense mutation testing, you need to change all the expressions in every possible way. So it's really high complexity. So yeah, it's not easy. So the other interesting approach in this case would be, for example, look at our test case, and we can see like all our test cases set up through items, right? We just set up some items, update them for 100 days. But then we can see that like that's an interesting backstage passes, and we have them in our regression right here. So that's kind of interesting because you can see, oh, that must be like a special type of item. So we can comment this out, run regression with coverage, and it's kind of the other way around, right? And then we can see which lines are red. That must be lines which are dealing with backstage passes, whatever they are. Like, that can gives you the reverse picture. So we can see, these lines are red. So that's all about backstage. And like, yes, indeed, this condition is name equals backstage. So that's like another little trick where you can see what's going on in the code. So it's not necessarily always super useful, but that's like one of the things to try.
I think it's useful. Wait, so how do you get those lines to pop up again?
Oh, you mean which lines? So if I comment, let's try this. I'll comment these 2 lines out, right? Then I go to IntelliJ run configuration, and you can like go right, click right, and there are more options how to run, like with profiler, with code coverage, or in debug. Right. Or you can go to edit configurations and go like plus something and configure everything yourself here. It will be somewhere here. So it's basically through run configuration, there is a built-in code coverage tool. So if I run this, then it pops up the tool window. Yeah, it's user interface is a bit annoying, I would say. But, well,
yeah, I've actually used this in the past, but I would say like the feature where like the green coverage like on the left next to the numbers, that's kind of a new IDE feature, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah, so like in this case, what I did, I commented out sulfurous, right? And these few lines became yellow, no red lines. But what that means is that it goes through this condition. Like there are 2 ways to go through this, true or false, and it only covers one of them. That's why it's yellow. Yeah, so that's all interesting. I think one thing which some people have been doing it for a while, but it's not a widespread knowledge, that you can use code coverage tools like on this line-by-line basis to write your tests and change your code with more confidence. I've seen most people use it, I think, in like SonarQube somewhere, stats average of the whole project, and don't look on line level very often. So that's a shame. So yeah, give it a try, see if it helps you. So finally, moving on to the refactoring, I guess, just to like trying to improve this code. So this is definitely like lots of stuff. And one way I found sometimes useful to explore the code is basically to collapse everything, which is like Command Shift minus in IntelliJ, and then expand one level at a time. So I'm pressing just Command plus. So that obviously, as we have seen, shows that there is only one function in this class, which is right. Expand one more level. It's actually just for loop. Right, so that's already easy to understand. And maybe this body of the for loop is a candidate to be separate function. And then if I expand one more level, you can see there are actually like 3 sections here. So maybe it's not completely random. So in real code bases, people do try to keep some structure. So if we've never seen this code, it could give us some hints. So whether it is the case here is maybe debatable. So I'll extract this into a separate function called update quality. So it's just an inner part of the for loop. So I'll run the tests, although it's not really necessary because I trust IntelliJ to get this right. In this case. So then we can see that IntelliJ also figured out what to do. I didn't tell it to extract I as a parameter. Let's look at the I. It seems like it's used in every line here with items. And here it's like I'm just following some heuristics. I don't have a particular kind of goal in mind necessarily when I do things like that. It's more like, oh, there is lots of duplication. Let's try and make it better. So, okay, lots of items. So I'll extract it as a parameter with Control-Alt-P, right? And IntelliJ, again, like being very clever, this is pretty cool, but it notices, like, if you extract an item, you don't need I anymore, so I'll just delete I as a parameter for you. So that's pretty cool. I'll run the regression again, so it kind of works. And if I highlight item, I can see again that it's used pretty much on every single line. Well, even before that, what is interesting is now that there is a warning in IDE, right? So, and it highlights that this expression is always 0, which makes sense. Item quality minus item quality. So maybe I'll do what IntelliJ suggests and keep it to 0, so all the tests pass. So again, it's also there's a question like how often do you want to commit? And I'll do lots of very frequent commits. So here I'll do like another commit refactoring. But again, because if I end up doing lots of small commits, it becomes tedious, like, oh, it's all refactoring. So why not just commit with the previous commit message, which is also a thing, like another plugin I wrote called Limited Work in Progress, which promotes the different workflows, but it, as one of the features, has this action, which is commit without dialog, bound to Command S, which is like a save in the file, and it commits with the previous commit message. So that's what I just did. So coming slightly back to the item being used in every line, that's again kind of stands out as a duplication, and it's a known refactoring code smell called feature envy. So if it was Java, it would maybe like make me think that this whole function should be moved into an item class. But in Kotlin, there is like a softer option. If you hesitate, just like converted parameter to receiver. So this transformation. So we pretend that update quality is defined on item. That kind of looks good to me. So why not? And once again, once we do this transformation, IntelliJ notices more things to improve. So it says replace with operator assignment. So I'll just like, yeah, I'll press F1, which is the default, like the topmost thing. So I'm pressing like F2, F1, basically, and fixing things. But yeah, that's another change. So I'll save it. And then there is also a question of if this update quality function is literally just operating an item, does it need to be inside Gilded Rose class? So I can like try and move it out just to see if it works, and it does. In Java, alternative would be like to call it static function, but in Kotlin, there are like moving to companions a bit more hassle sometimes. So yeah, in any case, I think this is a bit better because if anyone reads this code, it's obvious that update quality function now doesn't need to know anything about Gilded Rose. So that's a good change. And now looking back at Gilded Rose, there are items, array of items, and we go through each index in this array, and then we get in the item. So we actually don't need indices, right? So we can just go for each item and can replace it with for each. And well, maybe we can call it and just remove it. And there is always like a separate question, like what is the purpose of the Gilded Rose class now? Because it just wraps items, and it's literally one function, which is quite simple. So should this class even exist, or maybe it could be just one function, right? And this like simple transformation makes you think maybe it should be a bit more functional. It's also could be, I think, val here. It doesn't need to be var, which reduces mutability, which is always a good thing. So I'll commit this as well. So like finally, I guess like everything which was done up to now, I didn't even start reading these conditions, right? It was already kind of some good progress, I think. So at some point we will have to read this. So I guess let's try. So the first line says, if name of an item not equals aged brie and not equals this backstage passes, then if quality is greater than 0, then if name is not something, then we reduce quality. So it seems like overall, it's already quite convoluted, but overall what's going on is just comparing name to something and then modify quality. So it's like quality degrades on each day. Each time we update the item, its quality goes down. So something along these lines, I guess. So one thing which I guess comes to my mind immediately is that actually there is some duplication. There's definitely backstages used 3 times. There's magical constants, which is like a well-known smell. So that's like one way to go to evolve the code. We could like refactor something like that. Constants. That's a well-known improvement, I guess. But I'm kind of hesitated to do it right now, and I'll probably just undo it because I don't think like it's a massive problem, and maybe I'll just try something else. What I'm also trying to illustrate here is that refactoring is never like a straight path. It's fine to just try things out, and then if you're not sure, just undo them and try something else. So here, what comes to my attention is that there's lots of negations, which are a bit suspicious. And I can see there are 7 negations on the name. And when I highlight name equals, there is only 1 out of 1. So there is lots of negations. So there is a trick in IntelliJ is that there is a refactoring invert if condition. If you press Alt-Enter, there is an intention to invert, but it actually is a refactoring because it's doing a safe transformation, well, most of the time, as far as I know. So that's like one thing to try. So what I'm suggesting, we can just try and invert all conditions on names and see what the code looks like. So here, say, like I inverted this one condition, right? Then there is this name not equal, so I'll just invert things and see if I like that or not. So let's invert this. I'm not even thinking too much. I'm just going to invert everything. And invert this one. So I'm not sure about the top one, right? There's like a lot of code. But down here, it seems like it might be more linear. So if I do, for example, like if I format everything slightly differently, I can see that at least like the first 2, aged brie and backstage pass, the whole code becomes kind of linear. These conditions are out of order. So if I could do this, then it would work. So yeah, maybe it's something to try. So I'll undo everything. That's just to illustrate that it's fine to kind of undo things. And I'll try something else before because I think this code is a bit verbose, it doesn't even fit on the screen, so I'll just try a bit of formatting just to condense it a bit. I'll remove some empty lines. What I'm doing here, I'm using Ctrl-Shift-J to just join the lines, because it's literally formatting. I think it's not very controversial to just format some lines. Another thing we can do, we can merge these ifs. So again, it's another refactoring, which basically joins these ifs, because logically, if this is true, then we apply this condition, which is equivalent to this AND operator. And do I think the same here? So it kind of fits on the screen now, and I hope it passes the test. So yeah, so that's something I would do. Now let's come back and try invert things here. So like invert this condition. Whoa, that was unexpected. So let me try and invert this. Okay, this is fine. This is fine. We can join these 2 lines. So that's quite linear now, right? So these are 2 names. Then here it's a bit more tricky because I kind of want to split these conditions maybe. What we can do is logically we can use another transformation from this code, is like flip this condition. So the name comparison goes first, and then we can use this refactoring called split if into 2. So we're kind of doing the reverse of what we had before. So then if I invert this condition, let's say, well, so the problem here is that if I invert this condition, it's doing an early return, which is not very nice. It's kind of a side effect in some way. So I'll add an empty else clause, and then I do invert. Then IntelliJ does what I want. But now it complains that if has an empty body. So I could try and do this, like quality equals quality, like a no-op, then IntelliJ complains about that. So one way, I think, maybe to make it not complain, say -0, and it doesn't complain. And I think it's kind of in line with all the other lines. That's like we're reducing quality in other branches here, I think. So these can be, I guess we can join these, remove braces from else. And now we have like these nice 3 sequential comparisons of names. And then we have else, which I guess like all other types of items. So that's pretty cool, because I was like, this can be achieved by literally chasing the idea that name comparison should be not negated and then discovering this bit. So this is really helpful, hopeful and helpful. So we can now try the same thing here. So I'll invert the top condition. So now like names are equal to Brie, or name is equal to backstage. So this is not as straightforward. And the problem is that inside there, the name is kind of compared to backstage twice. And if you think about it a bit like logically a bit more, you might be able to convince yourself so that if we duplicate this, we can, for example, remove this condition from here and remove these conditions from here. So we kind of split it into 2, and then, logically we can deal with this separately. So luckily, we don't need to do it manually. So I'll undo everything. So I'll invert it, and then there is another refactoring here, which is called split if into 2. So IntelliJ understands that this or condition means that it can be split if into 2. So it's essentially just all this bit is now, you see, it's like all the yellow background was copy pasted twice for us. And the top condition is aged Brie, the bottom is just the second condition. And now what we see, this highlighted says like this condition, the line 15, is always false because name is aged Brie. So it's like, okay, I'll rename it to false. Well, change it to false because it seems reasonable to me. And this condition is always true. So these are deliberately tiny steps so that it's a proper refactoring. So now, like, obviously, if condition is always true, it can be simplified to just call this code. And if condition is always false, it also can be just deleted. So if I do this, there are no more warnings in the file, and it's also like very kind of nice looking sequential comparison of names, of like names to age, Brie, backstage, and so on. And here we have a similar situation we had in the if files below. So what I can do, can I join these ifs together? Then I'll flip this condition, and then I can split if into 2 and invert the condition. I'll use the same trick again, quality minus equals 0, and I'll remove braces from else. So I'm running regression every time I change something. So this is all good. And it's also useful, I think, to try and convert it to n. Sometimes I like the way it looks, sometimes I don't. I think in this case, I do like it more because similar to replacing for with for each, this is less flexible than just a random if condition, because with this condition, it just compares it to string literal. So it's a bit more boring and means few things can go wrong or be too tricky. So let's convert this bit as well. So I won't reformat this, I guess. Yeah, now everything still fits on the screen, and I guess it still all works. That's kind of cool. I'll commit this. So there is one place now left where we're comparing name, but we have negation, which is here. And if we invert this, it says, well, if it has an empty body, so because the other branch is modifying cell in, I'll also modify cell in by 0, just to make it symmetric, both branches basically. And but yeah, that should still work, right? Then IntelliJ now highlights something else. It says that assignment can be lifted out of if. So if I just do this by pressing F1, so this is what happens. It's taking this whole condition, and we will have just one assignment now. So the whole condition just returns us a number and then assigned once. And I think in a way it's pretty cool because if I highlight the cell in field, whatever that means. If there's the meaning of this field. Like we see it's modified in 2 places, and after the transformation, it's modified in 1 place. So it's like this way we're reducing the points where the field can be modified. So like what I'm doing, if you highlight it in the file, you see a bit more pink background means this is a place where it can be modified, and blue background means that it's just red in those cases. So I think that's a useful transformation, right? So there are a few places where things are changed, so like easier to reason about the code and so on, potentially. So that I like this, and it also gives me an interesting idea that what about quality? So if I highlight quality, we see like lots of pink on every line pretty much. So like that gives us another idea. What if we could do the same thing with quality, right? It's not that easy right now because in each branch of our when expression, they are modifying quality. So in the first place, we need to convert whens into like proper expressions, which will return values. So maybe that's something to think about. So just as a quick detour from this is all kind of good. But if I actually go back to regression, and I don't know if many people noticed, there was this comment saying that on line 17 that this conjugate item doesn't work properly yet. If we also look, like there is also a file called Gilded Rose requirements, like a text file. We can open it. And to be fair, it's like there are different ways of doing this code kata, right? So we can choose our own way. But if we open it and start reading it, we're saying that we are a small inn with prime location, and they buy and sell goods. Then they say we have a system with inventory, and it was created by someone, and then it says your task is to add the new feature to our system. So actually, if you read the requirements document, it's not about refactoring, it's about add a new feature, right? So we can begin selling a new category of items. And that's the item which is here called conjugate, right? So if I search doc requirements for the conjugate items, they say we have recently signed up a supplier of conjugate items, and conjugate items degrade in quality twice as fast as normal items. So just to clarify it a bit, so I guess going back to requirements, so all items have sell-in value, all items have quality, and at the end of each day, my system lowers both values. So sell-in also denotes the number of days, which is maybe not the best name, sell-in, because it should be sell-in days, maybe. So there are lots of questions. So yeah, just mentioning this, I think I'm not going to go down this path of adding conjugate item, but it's just worth mentioning that actually, if you think about it, the whole exercise is about helping someone to add a feature. And I think at this point, the code is probably in a good enough state that we could maybe add something like conjugate minor cake. So we can assume that else condition is the normal item, and they say conjugate minor cake degrades twice as fast. So we could do something like that. I'm not going to do it, but that's the idea. I think that this is good enough to be able to add a feature if somebody asks for it.
I kind of like this. It's like a real world case where, someone comes to you with hey, here's what I think the answer is to the so you have to do a lot of trace back, well, what does conjure even mean?
Oh yeah, there are lots of questions.
Yeah. Oh, quick question. We do have an additional question from the audience. Where do you push the final version of the code? Can you send something like a PR to show all changes at once? This sounds like a possible GitHub question, but if you happen to have
all the changes I save that I do on the branch, so I'll just push this branch to GitHub and tweet it. If that's the question.
Possibly. So let me just yeah, where do you push final version? Can you send something like a PR to show? Yeah, sorry. So I can help answer this question as well. I'm just going to restate the question one more time for the audience. The question is, where do you push the final version of the code? Can you send something like a PR to show all changes at once? Elvira, I'm not sure like if you currently work with like GitHub or anything like that, but yeah, if you have like the project pulled down, there's like a Git init, you're able to commit your changes and you can branch it off. There's actually like a fun trick that you can also do. You can check your changes locally, and also you can check your commit changes in your Git history right in the IntelliJ IDE itself. Sorry, Dmitry. Would you mind right clicking the screen? And I believe you'll see.
Do you want to
Yeah,
see history of commits?
perhaps maybe that would
Yeah,
be
well, yeah, sure.
helpful.
So this is
Yeah.
the Git tool window. If I make it really long, then I can go to log, and that's
Mhm.
what I've been doing
Oh,
today. So
it's
you can see
never like.
lots of
Yeah.
refactoring. Then you can see diffs. So like in each commit, you can see files which were changed
Mhm.
there. So if I press like Control D, it shows me the diff before and after.
Yeah, I
And
think
also
that's what
ignore
the user was
white
probably
spaces.
asking more about.
Right.
Yeah, that is one I actually enjoy doing this way, and one of the exciting things is not only you can check your Git diff. There's some cases where you do like some work and maybe you should have committed a little more, but you can also
Hmm.
check your local changes, which is amazing. It's
Oh,
been life
local
saving.
history, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
it must be local
Yeah, and
history.
that's
That's what.
different from Git. Yeah,
Yes, it's IntelliJ. Yeah.
this is an IntelliJ specific. So it actually like you can like see like where he's changed it like step by step too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I
But this
think
is
every time you run
yeah.
a test, it's like has a tag in
Mm,
local history. Yeah.
that's so sick.
Yeah.
um Yeah, I do apologize. Like I said, I haven't like done like kind of like, hey, like what is this group made out of? So I'm not sure if our viewers like are at a newer level or at an advanced level. So it's
Oh, no
definitely time to
worries.
take stock. So,
Mhm.
yeah, please thank you all for your questions so far. Don't be afraid to ask any
Yeah.
questions at all. So these
Yeah.
have been great questions.
Yeah,
Mhm.
also like on this topic, just like because we were
Yeah.
sharing some tricks, I find it
Mhm.
useful, and maybe not all people use, that you can have selection and then you can go to Git and it show history for selection. So what I'm showing right now is just the top condition. So it's not
Oh,
the
that's
whole
so
file.
convenient. So, like,
It's
just
just
that
the
portion of the code. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. It can be sometimes useful just to see what happened to this bit of code, not the whole file. It kind of will have fewer commits probably than if you look at the full history of the file.
Very cool stuff. I apologize. I'm gonna let you
No, not at
keep
all.
going.
It's good. It's good. Well, I mean, I can also go in any direction, so I guess I'll just like try and do the final thing to like make this code a bit more, even more functional with like fewer side effects. What I was mentioning, to try and get rid of this quality being changed on every line, because I think it's kind of the neat thing
It
to
is a
do.
bit of an eyesore. Mhm.
But there are other ways to evolve this code in different directions, really. So the question here is like, there is obviously a bit of duplication with like, yeah, going again with duplication, like even comparing to 50, it's like, what is going on there? Or to 0, why is it compared all over the place? There actually isn't the requirements, so I kind of, we didn't read it. Then it says like the quality of item is never negative and the quality of an item is never more than 50. So that's the range. And that's what it's actually doing here, all these comparisons. That can give us an idea. So maybe there should be a function called update quality. And it's like, oops, there is a clash because item is called update quality. So let me undo what I did. And then it's like, why this item update quality is called quality? It also updates selling. That's maybe a misleading name. So I would argue it should be called update because it updates not just quality, right? So it should still work. So I'll commit this. Now we can go back and extract this as update quality. So it's extracted this in a couple places, but we actually wanted to have maybe a parameter quality change. So it will be more flexible. So it's now like update quality 1. And so what we learned from the requirements, I guess, is that we want quality to be within 0 and 50. And there is a function built in Kotlin called in, and you can specify 2 values. Or I can add names, I guess. Minimum value and maximum value. That's what we want. So then we don't need this condition, I think. And maybe, again, if I highlighted, there are like 2 lines where we modify quality. Maybe we want to do it just in one place, is do something like that. A bit more refactoring. So yeah, no, that's kind of cool. So now we can go and replace quality +1, I guess, with this function, because it will take care of, I'll just do a bulk thing, because it will take care of range conditions, right? So this passes the test. And then again, then we don't need maybe all these checks here in these 2 places at least. I'll just run the tests. So yeah, that's kind of cool. If I'm not going to go into detail, but it's the same thing here. We don't really need to compare for this quality beforehand. It kind of simplifies things quite a bit. Another thing is to update this condition, so it can be -1 as well, I think. So yeah, still passes the test. That's kind of cool. So I'll save this, because I think in this case we resetting quality to 0, so that's update quality minus quality, I suppose. In some ways, this is a bit ironic, because this was one of the first refactorings we did, and so we went back to quality minus quality, which is fine. And it's a bit more tricky with sulfurous, because if we try and say update quality 0, I think it will fail, because, well, we can look at the diff and we can see all the lines are different now. So on the left-hand side is what we expect, and we expect the 3rd column, which is quality, to be 80 for sulfurous, but it was 50. And that's misleading. Why do we expect it as 80? The answer is that actually in the requirements, if we search for quality, there is some exception for sulfurous saying an item can never have its quality above 50. However, sulfurous is legendary and it can have its quality, and its quality is 80 and never alters. So that's why it's 80. So okay, that's an edge case. Maybe the most straightforward thing to say, okay, if name equals this, then just return, do another return. What I'm doing is just to pass the test. I guess that's one of the strategies, to just make the test pass and then improve your code instead of coming up with perfect solution straight away. So this works, but I don't like having this name inside update quality. So one workaround I can come up with, say, if quality change is 0, then just return. So it's less specific. But now we can see that we kind of improved this code, right? So if I highlight quality field, again, it has ping background only in one place, which is kind of cool. There is a bit of asymmetry that we update selling inside this function called update, and selling is updated there, but quality updated to some other function. So that's maybe another thing to think about. But in general, we're kind of getting close to have a similar thing, that the whole when condition is just one big expression. The only place where it's not the case is this, right? Place where we have all these 3 lines. So yeah, and I'm not going to explain it in detail, but ultimately you might notice that we can just rearrange these fields, because selling these lines because selling doesn't change between them, so we can actually change them in any way and the tests still work. And then if selling is less than 6 and definitely doesn't change between these 2 lines, we can do else, because if selling is less than 6, then it also is less than 11, so we can update it twice on line 15. So you see what I'm doing, just make it else and add 2 there. And 3rd line, we can do it also else and update it, this to 3, this to 2. Then this whole thing becomes an expression. So I can remove brace from if else. And yeah, so now everything is an expression, so we should be able to do just update quality and move the whole when into there. And I'll just do this bulk change. Should do that differently. Yeah, so that should still work, right? And now whole when is just returning numbers, and update quality is called once, which is also a good thing because even though we were hiding update quality modification of the field quality inside this function has side effects, and like having this function every line, it's basically having side effects on every line. So it's the same here, it's the same idea here, that we can just move the whole when into update quality. Let's replace it. Something like that. I guess, yeah, that's the idea. So you can see that we're now getting closer to being able to assign quality once. There's like another thing which I would even do before that is to like notice that if selling is about days, that it's kind of funny that within the same function, selling has one value and on line 26 has a different value. That's a bit confusing. So why, for example, not we move it to the top? That would make more sense to me, because if it's a new day and on each day we update items, then it would be like in the beginning of the day we like take counter down, and then we operate on the new days left till the item must be sold. So if we move it up, though, what I just did, if I move it up, that means that inside this condition, sell-in will be decreased. So we should adjust our conditions, I think, to this. So that should still work. So yeah. And then sell-in is definitely the same value. And I'll save that, and maybe like the other thing we could do is call this comparison. For example, sell-in, call it expired. For example, convert it into property. We'll do it just quickly now. And then we can try and merge these two updates into one. I could say like if expired, then it's 2, because then it will be done twice. And I can reset this value to 0. So basically, instead of doing 1 here and 1 here, we're just doing 2 here. And the same idea, the same trick can be done for backstage pass, where you just say minus quality. Essentially, we just move this value into upper if else. So that should still work. And the same thing with sulfurous. Expired minus 2 else 1. So we'll replace this with 0. And obviously, all these updates to 0, this is now like a no-op, so I can just destroy the whole if else. So yeah, the stats still pass. And now we can extract this maybe into quality change. Or like even better, I guess, this function now, update quality, is called only once, right? So I can go back and like inline it. Oh, it has a return, so I need to invert it first. And if it's used once, we can inline it. Then it's kind of right now still that sell-in and quality, they are updated within the same function. And quality change just signed once, and then it's passed to update quality, basically. So it's like, this is the state I would like. I guess now it becomes, one idea might be just like actually keep extracting function, but maybe extract them like this. So say this is going to be update sell-in, this is going to be update quality, and going in this direction, maybe. So, there are different ways to evolve this code. Then like the other idea could be why even to look at why, for example, name, sell-in, and quality are mutable. I think we're now in a position where the quality and sell-in updated only like in one place. We could make this whole item is immutable and so on. But I'm not going to go down this path. I'll just do quick slides at the end. So because I've been doing this kata every now and then for the last 7 maybe years at different meetups. So that's why I'm framing this as more like, what did I learn from this as a mini retro? So the first thing I was doing is that I actually realized I do tidy up while reading code. Even if I end up not modifying it massively, at least I'm making it better. And as you have seen, figuring out good code coverage is tricky. Then I realized that I use quite a lot now F1 to apply the most, like the topmost inspection, and I use it's in combination with F2. So I press F2 to jump to the next yellow thing, and F1 to fix. So I kind of develop intuition to know what F1 will do over time. And then Command Shift minus plus to expand collapse. Then Alt Enter is the new control space, because auto completion happens automatically in IntelliJ. So that's the new control space for me. Alt Enter and explore things there. So there are some hidden refactorings which are not in refactoring menu. They are intentions and inspections, but they are refactorings by the definition of refactoring. Then I think this approach of like doing one change at a time and going back if I hesitate or if I'm stuck, that approach works well for me. Then I think it's interesting that just looking at IntelliJ hints or like idiomatic, or trying to move code into idiomatic Kotlin, this emergent design appears, because this exercise was never designed for Kotlin. It's kind of interesting that Kotlin guides you towards a good place. And what I was showing is kind of a happy path, and I didn't show like all the problems which refactoring tools still have, especially for Kotlin, so that could be definitely improved. And the most important thing is that you should try Gilded Rose yourself. So I showed this link, I'll tweet it. One thing to keep in mind is that what I showed is not necessarily the right thing. There is no perfect solution. This is not a coding interview exercise at all. It's an exploration, and you should try different things at different time. And because it's an exploration, it's good to share it with someone. So that's why it's good to pair program with someone. I would recommend that. And ultimately, why not like share the joy that you have from work? I'm sure there was some code which you improved, so why not create your own refactoring kata and popularize refactoring approaches? And this is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dmitry. That was a really great presentation. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, no, it's building plugins for IDE. For IDEs like IntelliJ is pretty difficult. I'm sure it'll get better over time. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Are there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave with everyone?
Well, I guess that was the retro. Definitely try it yourself, this kata, and maybe create your own.
I really like that idea. I think it could be like a fun team bonding activity or something. So yeah. Thank you so much again, and thank you to everyone who watched the live presentation. And we'll be having some more Kotlin user meetups in the near future. So please be sure to keep an eye on the meetup page. Thank you, Dmitry.
Thank
I
you.
hope you have a good afternoon or evening. I think it's getting towards evening now. So, okay, well, take care and have a good weekend, everyone.